I flew to Los Angeles without warning and found my daughter dying alone in intensive care. Her husband was celebrating on a yacht, so I left him penniless. An hour later, he lost his mind. While my only child lay connected to life support fighting for every single heartbeat, her husband was popping champagne bottles on a luxury yacht 20 miles away. He told me he was in Dubai closing a deal to save her life. He lied. He thought I was just a retired old man from Montana with dirt under his fingernails and a truck that had seen better days. He forgot that before I was a grandfather, I was a shark. By the time the sun set that day, I didn't just expose him. I erased him. Before we dive into this nightmare, tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you would never forgive a family member for doing? Like and subscribe if you believe in karma. Now let me tell you how I dismantled a monster. The only sound in the world was the beep. It was a monotonous, rhythmic, terrifying electronic pulse that dictated whether my world continued to turn or ground to a halt. Beep, beep, beep. I stood in the doorway of room 402 in the ICU at Cedars-Sinai, gripping the handle of my battered leather overnight bag until my knuckles turned white. The air smelled of rubbing alcohol and chilled steel. It was the smell of bad news. My daughter Sarah looked like a child in that bed. She was 32 years old, but surrounded by tubes, wires, and monitors, she looked exactly like the 6-year-old girl I used to tuck in after nightmares. Her skin was the color of old parchment. Her chest barely rose. I walked to the bedside, my boots squeaking on the sterile linoleum. I reached out and touched her hand. It was cold. Not just cool, but a deep, pervasive cold that made my stomach turn over. Where was he? I looked around the room. There was a single plastic chair in the corner. It was empty. There was no jacket thrown over the back of it, no half-drunk cup of coffee on the side table, no crumpled magazines. The room was sterile, devoid of any human presence other than my unconscious daughter. "Excuse me, sir." I turned. A nurse stood in the doorway. She looked tired, her eyes holding that professional mix of pity and exhaustion that ICU nurses wear like a uniform. She was holding a clipboard. "I am Douglas Sterling." Her father. She nodded, checking the chart. "Mr. Sterling, we were told you were flying in from Montana. I am glad someone is finally here with her." The way she said finally sent a spike of adrenaline through my chest. I gently placed Sarah's hand back on the sheet. "Where is her husband? Where is Bradley?" The nurse hesitated. She looked down at her clipboard, then back at me. It was a look I knew well. It was the look of someone who wanted to tell the truth but was bound by professional courtesy. "Mr. Coulter has not been here since admission, sir. He dropped her off at the emergency intake 3 days ago. He said he had urgent business to attend to. He left instructions that he was to be contacted only for emergency changes in her status. 3 days. My daughter had been lying here, her heart failing her body, shutting down after a botched surgery, and the man who vowed to love her in sickness and in health had dropped her off like a suit at the dry cleaners." The nurse stepped fully into the room. She lowered her voice even though Sarah couldn't hear us. "Mr. Sterling, there is another matter. Since you are here, maybe you can help us understand what is going on. We have tried to run the deposit for the additional surgical procedures Dr. Evans recommends. The hospital billing department has attempted to process the card on file 3 times this morning." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small slip of paper. It was a rejection receipt. "It was declined, sir. We called Mr. Coulter, but it went to voicemail. Sarah's insurance covers the basics, but the specialized care she needs right now requires a copay deposit. Usually for a man in Mr. Coulter's line of work, this wouldn't be an issue. But the card came back as insufficient funds." I took the slip of paper. It was a platinum Amex, the kind Bradley loved to flash at dinner parties when he insisted on paying only to complain about the service later. "Declined." I felt a cold rage settling in my gut. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of a younger man. It was the icy, calculated fury of a man who realizes his worst fears were not paranoid delusions. They were prophecies. I looked at my daughter's face. I remembered the day she married him. I had warned her. I had told her that Bradley Coulter was a hollow man, a man who looked at people and saw only dollar signs. She had accused me of being cynical, of not understanding modern love. She said he was a visionary investor. I pulled out my own wallet. It was worn leather purchased at a feed store 10 years ago. I pulled out a black card that I rarely used. Run this. Whatever she needs. If you need to fly in a specialist from Switzerland, do it. I will cover it. The nurse took the card, looking relieved. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I will let the billing department know. Dr. Evans will be here shortly to discuss the surgery. He needs consent. She left me alone with the beeping sound. I pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling, not from age, but from the effort it took not to smash the device against the wall. I dialed Bradley's number. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then the click. You have reached the voicemail of Bradley Coulter, Managing Director of Coulter Capital. I am currently traveling for business and have limited access to phone and email. Leave a message and my team will get back to you. I didn't leave a message. I hung up and texted him. I am at the hospital. Sarah is critical. Call me. Now. I watched the screen. Delivered. Nothing. I waited 1 minute. 2 minutes. The monitor beeped. Sarah's breath rattled in her chest. Then 3 dots appeared. He was typing. My phone buzzed. Doug. I am in a high-level meeting with partners in Dubai. Time zone difference is killing me. I cannot talk right now. The signal is spotty. I am praying for her. Please do not blow up my phone. I need to focus on closing this deal so I can pay for her treatments. The doctors have my instructions. Dubai. I stared at the screen. Dubai was 12 hours ahead. If he was in a meeting, it was the middle of the night there, or early morning. The excuse was flimsy, but Bradley always relied on the fact that I was just a simple man from the mountains who wouldn't know flight paths or time zones. The door opened again. A man in a white coat entered. Dr. Evans. He looked grave. Mr. Sterling. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, but his eyes were avoiding mine. Cut to the chase, doctor. She needs a valve repair. Immediately. Her heart is struggling to pump. The first surgery caused a complication we didn't foresee. We need to go back in. But the risk is high. There is a 40% chance she won't make it off the table. Do it, I said. Save her. I cannot, Mr. Sterling. Not without consent. I am giving you consent. I am her father. Dr. Evans sighed. He opened the folder in his hands. That is the problem. Sarah has a medical proxy on file. It assigns all decision-making power to her husband, Bradley Coulter. Unless he is incapacitated or deceased, he is the only one who can authorize a high-risk procedure. We have sent him the digital forms hours ago. He hasn't signed them. I felt the blood drain from my face. He says he is in Dubai. He says the signal is bad. Dr. Evans shook his head. Mr. Sterling, without that signature, my hands are tied. If I operate and she dies, he can sue the hospital for everything we have. We need his authorization. You need to get him on the phone. I looked at my dying daughter. She was being held hostage by a digital signature from a man who couldn't be bothered to answer a phone call. I will get the signature. I said, my voice dropping an octave. Keep her alive until then. Dr. Evans nodded and left. I stood there feeling more helpless than I had ever felt in my 68 years. I had built a logistics empire. I had moved cargo through war zones. I had negotiated with union bosses and corrupt politicians. but I couldn't get my daughter into a surgery room because of a piece of paper. My phone buzzed again. A video call. I looked at the screen. It was Leo, my 6-year-old grandson. I forced a smile onto my face. I couldn't let him see the fear. I accepted the call. "Hi, champ." Grandpa Doug Leo's face filled the screen. He was wearing his pajamas holding a toy dinosaur. He was staying with Bradley's mother in San Diego, while Sarah was in the hospital. Bradley had said it was better for the boy not to see his mother sick. "Grandpa, are you with Mommy?" "Yes, Leo. Mommy is sleeping right now. She loves you very much. Is she doing the winter sleep like the bears?" I frowned. "What do you mean, Leo?" "Daddy said Mommy is doing a long winter sleep. He said she's tired." "But guess what? Daddy is a pirate." My heart stopped. "A pirate?" "Yeah. He called me on the video. He is on a big white boat. He said he is hunting for treasure to buy me a castle. Look, he sent me a picture." Leo held up a tablet to the phone camera. The image was grainy but clear enough. It was a screenshot of a video call Leo had taken earlier. Bradley was indeed on a boat, a yacht. He was wearing sunglasses and a white linen shirt unbuttoned to his chest. The sun was bright behind him. "Leo, when did Daddy call you just now before dinner?" It was 5 in the afternoon in Los Angeles. If Bradley was in Dubai, it would be 5 in the morning. The sun in the picture was high and bright. It was the distinctive golden sunlight of a California afternoon. "Okay, Leo. That sounds exciting. Grandpa has to go help Mommy sleep. Be a good boy for Grandma." "Okay," I hung up. My hands were no longer shaking. They were steady. Stone steady. I opened the Instagram app on my phone. Not my real account. Bradley had blocked me on his main profile years ago, calling me negative energy. I opened the burner account I had created to keep an eye on them. A profile named Montana Rancher 44. I searched for Bradley's handle. King Brad Capital. Private account. Of course. But Bradley was a narcissist. He couldn't exist without an audience. And narcissists usually tagged people, or were tagged by people. I searched for the location tag. Marina del Rey. It was the yacht harbor just 30 minutes from the hospital. I scrolled through the recent posts under the location tag. Hundreds of photos of tourists, sunsets, and boats. Then I saw it. A photo posted 10 minutes ago by a user named Crystal Clear Vibes. The photo showed 2 hands holding champagne flutes against the backdrop of the Pacific Ocean. On the wrist of the male hand was a distinctive gold Rolex, the Daytona model. I knew that watch. I had given it to Bradley as a wedding gift, hoping to buy his loyalty to my daughter. The caption read, "New beginnings. Freedom calling. Finally. Yacht life. Meshrach soulmate. Bye-bye baggage." I clicked on Crystal's profile. It was public. Her story was active. I tapped the circle. A video played. It was loud. Electronic dance music pumped through my phone speakers. The camera panned around the deck of a massive white yacht. People were dancing. Waiters were passing trays of oysters. And there he was. Bradley. He wasn't in a meeting. He wasn't praying. He was standing on the deck, holding a magnum of champagne. He was laughing, his head thrown back. A girl in a tiny gold bikini, Crystal, was wrapped around his arm. She whispered something in his ear, and he kissed her. Then he looked at the camera and shouted over the music. "To the future, to the upgrade." The video ended. I lowered the phone. I looked at Sarah. Bye-bye baggage. That was the hashtag. My daughter, the woman who had worked double shifts to support him while he built his fake empire, the mother of his child, was the baggage. And suddenly, the pieces clicked together. The declined card, the The delay in signing the consent form, the lies about Dubai. He didn't just want to party. He was stalling. He knew about the surgery risk. He knew that without the surgery, her heart would give out within 24 hours. He wasn't waiting for her to get better. He was running out the clock. He was waiting for her to die. If she died, he got the life insurance. He got the house. He got the remaining trust fund that unlocked upon her death. If she survived, he was broke, exposed, and married to a sick woman. He was murdering my daughter by doing absolutely nothing. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. I took a deep breath. The air in the room felt different now. It was no longer a place of mourning. It was a war room. I am not a violent man. I don't believe in physical retribution. It is messy and illegal. I believe in consequences. I believe in the absolute total destruction of an enemy's capacity to wage war. Bradley Coulter wanted to play the high roller. He wanted to be a captain of industry. I unlocked my phone again. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't dialed in 5 years. Catherine Vance. She was the most expensive, ruthless estate attorney in the state of California. She was also the woman who had helped me set up the original trust fund for Sarah. The trust fund with the hidden clauses that Bradley never bothered to read because the legal language was too boring for him. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Douglas, is everything all right, no cat? It's time. Time for what? Time to execute the Omega Protocol. There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. Are you sure, Douglas? Once we pull that trigger, there is no going back. It freezes everything. It strips him of the house, the accounts, the cars, even the shirt on his back if we bought it. It is the nuclear option. I looked at the video of Bradley kissing his mistress while my daughter lay dying. He is on a yacht in the Marina Cat. Sarah is dying, and he is refusing to sign the surgery consent forms because he is waiting for her to expire. He is celebrating her death before she is even cold. I heard the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. The professional detachments vanished. I am leaving my office now, Douglas. I will have the emergency injunction filed within 20 minutes. I will meet you at the hospital with the guardianship transfer papers. And Kat, yes, call the bank. Call my contact at the private wealth division. Tell them to purchase the debt, all of it. The mortgage on his house, the lease on his car, his credit lines. I want to own every cent he owes. Consider it done. I hung up. I walked back to Sarah's bed. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Hold on, sweetheart, I whispered. Daddy is going to work. I sat down in the plastic chair. I crossed my legs. And I waited. 20 miles away, Bradley was pouring another glass of champagne thinking he had won the lottery. He didn't know that the lottery ticket was about to explode in his hand. He didn't know that the old farmer from Montana just bought the yacht he was standing on. The beep of the monitor didn't sound like a countdown anymore. It sounded like a ticking bomb, and the fuse had just been lit. The phone felt heavy in my hand, like a loaded weapon. I turned my back on the window and the view of the parking lot. I needed to focus. The silence in the room was broken only by the rhythmic, mechanical hiss of the ventilator breathing for my daughter. I scrolled past my contacts for the house sitter and the local sheriff until I found the name that Bradley feared more than God himself. Catherine Vance. I pressed the call button. There was no ringback tone. Catherine didn't believe in wasting time. The line simply clicked open. State your business, Douglas. Her voice was crisp, devoid of pleasantries. It was the voice of a woman who charged $1,200 an hour and was worth every cent. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask about the weather in Montana. Catherine knew that if I was calling her personal line, the world was already burning. I need you to open the vault, Cat. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the faint scratch of a fountain pen on paper. She stopped writing. Which vault, Douglas? Be specific. The Sterling Family Trust. The contingency clause. I am initiating the Omega Protocol, effective immediately. The silence on the line stretched for 5 seconds. When Catherine finally spoke, her tone had shifted. The sharpness was gone, replaced by a low, cautious intensity. Douglas listened to me very carefully. You haven't touched the Omega Clause since we drafted it 10 years ago. Do you understand what you are asking? That isn't a legal maneuver. That is a nuclear strike. If I file that motion, we are freezing everything. The joint accounts, the real estate portfolio, the investment lines. We are declaring a state of financial martial law. I looked at Sarah. Her face was gray. The numbers on the monitor were dropping. He is letting her die, Cat. The pen scratching stopped completely. Explain. He is 20 miles away on a yacht in Marina del Rey, drinking champagne with a mistress. He is refusing to sign the consent for emergency heart surgery. He told the doctors he is in Dubai and cannot be reached. He is running out the clock on her life to collect the insurance payout. I heard the sound of a chair scraping back. I could picture Catherine standing up in her corner office in downtown Los Angeles, the city lights reflecting in her cold eyes. I am leaving the office now. Wait. I need more than your presence. I need you to bypass the proxy. Dr. Evans says Bradley has sole medical authority. I need that authority revoked. Now. I can get an emergency injunction for abandonment, she said, her voice accelerating the legal gears already turning. If he is physically present in the jurisdiction, but claiming to be absent to avoid care, that is criminal negligence. I will wake up Judge Patterson. He owes me a favor. But Douglas, the Omega Protocol. If we do this, we are stripping Bradley of every asset he thinks he owns. The house, the cars, the credit cards. It is all technically held by the trust. Do it. Burn it all down. I want him to try to buy a pack of gum and get declined. I want him homeless before the sun comes up. Consider it done. I will have the papers at the hospital in 20 minutes. Do not let that doctor leave the room. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. My heart was pounding not from fear, but from the grim satisfaction of finally taking the safety off. For years I had played the part of the passive, distant father-in-law. I had let Bradley think he was the alpha male. I had let him think the trust fund was his personal piggy bank. Today he was going to learn that the piggy bank was actually a bear trap. The door to the ICU room slid open. Dr. Evans rushed in, followed by 2 nurses. The alarm on Sarah's monitor had started to beep faster, a high-pitched warning that tore through my nerves. Mr. Sterling, her blood pressure is crashing, Evans said, his voice tight. We are out of time. I need to stabilize her, but I cannot take her to the OR without that signature. Have you heard from Mr. Coulter? I didn't hesitate. I stepped between the doctor and the door. I stood to my full height. At 68, my back was stiff, but I was still 6'2" of Montana rancher. Forget Mr. Coulter. He is no longer part of this equation. Dr. Evans looked frantic. Sir, you don't understand the law. If I operate without his consent, I lose my license. I could go to jail. I pulled a folded document from my inside jacket pocket. It wasn't a legal form. It was my checkbook. But alongside it, I grabbed the hospital tablet the nurse had left on the counter. I am assuming full legal and financial liability for this patient, I said, my voice booming in the small room. My attorney is 20 minutes away with a court order stripping Bradley Coulter of his guardianship due to criminal abandonment. If you wait for those papers, my daughter dies. If you operate now, the only person who can sue you is me, and I am telling you to cut. Dr. Evans looked at me, then at the crashing vitals on the screen. He was sweating. I cannot just take your word for it, Mr. Sterling. Then take this. I grabbed the tablet. I pulled up the digital consent form that had been waiting for Bradley's signature. I scrolled to the bottom, where it said, relationship to patient. I crossed out husband and wrote father. I signed my name, Douglas J. Sterling. The letters were jagged, carved into the screen with a ferocity that nearly cracked the glass. I am worth $400 million, doctor, I said, staring him dead in the eye. If you save her, I will build you a new wing. If you let her die because of paperwork, I will spend every penny I have ensuring you never practice medicine again. The room went silent. The nurses looked at the doctor. The beep of the monitor was a frantic drumbeat. Dr. Evans looked at the signature. Then he looked at Sarah. He took a deep breath. Prep or one. He barked at the nurses. We are moving. Now. The team sprang into action. They unlocked the wheels of the bed. They began disconnecting the wall monitors and switching to portable units. As they rolled my daughter past me, her hand slipped off the side of the bed. I grabbed it one last time. It was still freezing cold. I will be here when you wake up, I whispered. And he won't be. I watched the doors swing shut behind them. I was alone in the empty room. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from the bank. Priority authorization request, Omega protocol initiated. All assets frozen. Confirm, I typed one word. Yes. I sat down in the plastic chair to wait for Catherine. The war had officially begun. Bradley Coulter was currently ordering another round of drinks on my dime. He didn't know it yet, but he had just paid for them with his life. The automatic doors of the ICU waiting area didn't just slide open. They seemed to part in deference to the woman walking through them. Catherine Vance had arrived. Even in the fluorescent harshness of a hospital corridor at night, she looked like she had just stepped out of a boardroom photo shoot. She wore a charcoal power suit that probably cost more than the average nurse's annual salary, and the click of her heels on the linoleum sounded like gunshots in an empty canyon. She wasn't carrying a briefcase. She was holding a single thick manila envelope as if it were a royal decree. I stood up. For the first time in hours, the crushing weight on my chest lightened just a fraction. Catherine didn't offer me a hug or a sympathetic smile. She offered me a curt nod. That was our language. Hugs were for people who accepted defeat. Nods were for soldiers entering the trenches. Is it done? I asked. She handed me a copy of the document. The ink on the judge's signature stamp looked wet. Judge Patterson wasn't happy about being woken up, but once I sent him the screenshot of the Instagram story, his mood shifted from annoyed to apoplectic. This is an emergency ex parte order granting you temporary sole guardianship over Sarah Sterling Coulter due to spousal abandonment and imminent medical neglect. She turned to the nurses' station, where the head administrator, a nervous-looking woman named Ms. Klein, was waiting with the hospital's legal counsel on speakerphone. I need to see the hospital risk manager. Now. Ms. Klein swallowed hard, adjusting her glasses. I am the night shift administrator. Legal is on the line. Mr. Sterling, we understand you are upset, but we cannot simply erase a husband's rights because of a family dispute. Mr. Coulter has legal precedent. Catherine stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She lowered it. It was a terrifying technique I had seen her use to dismantle union leaders and corporate raiders alike. She placed the court order on the counter, sliding it forward with a single manicured finger. Ms. Klein, I am Catherine Vance, senior partner at Vance & Associates. The document in front of you is a court order issued 12 minutes ago by the Superior Court of California. It declares that Bradley Coulter has forfeited his rights to make medical decisions for the patient in room 402. It cites criminal negligence and endangerment. The voice from the speakerphone crackled. This is hospital legal. We need to review the validity of that order. These things usually take 48 hours to process through our system. We have protocols. Catherine leaned in close to the speakerphone. Protocol. That is an interesting word. Let me tell you about another word. Liability. If you delay the processing of this order by even 5 minutes, and the patient suffers any adverse effect because her father was blocked from decision-making, I will not just sue this hospital. I will name you personally in a civil rights violation lawsuit. I will attach your home, your pension, and your future earnings to the judgment. I am not asking you to review it. I am telling you to comply with a court order. If you obstruct justice, I will have the U.S. Marshals here within the hour to explain the concept of contempt of court to you in person. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. Ms. Klein looked at the phone, then at Catherine, then at the document. She saw the judge's seal. She saw the timestamp. "Do it," the voice on the speakerphone said, sounding suddenly very small. "Update the file. Immediately, Ms." Klein typed furiously on her keyboard. I walked around the counter to stand behind her. I wanted to see it. I needed to see it with my own eyes. She pulled up Sarah's patient profile. There, under the tab marked Next of Kin and Medical Proxy, was the name Bradley Coulter. Next to it was a phone number that went straight to voicemail and an email address that was currently being used to book bottle service. "Delete it," I said. Ms. Klein hesitated for a split second, her finger hovering over the backspace key. "Mr. Sterling, once I do this, he will be blocked from receiving updates. He won't be allowed in the ICU. Security will be flagged to stop him at the elevators." "That is the point," Catherine said coldly. "He is not a husband anymore. He is a security threat." Ms. Klein pressed the key. Bradley. Letter by letter, his name disappeared from the screen. It was a digital exorcism. With every keystroke, I felt a layer of his toxic influence peeling away from my daughter's life. Ms. Klein typed in my name. Douglas Sterling, relationship father. She hit enter. A green banner flashed across the top of the screen, profile updated. Proxy authority confirmed. Catherine let out a breath she seemed to have been holding. She turned to me. "He is out, Douglas. Legally, he is now a stranger to her. If he tries to intervene in the surgery, he will be arrested for trespassing." "Thank you, Kat. Don't thank me yet. That was the easy part. The hospital is safe. Now we have to secure the perimeter. I have already sent the cease and desist order to his firm, but we need to execute the financial freeze before the banks open on the East Coast." I looked at the clock on the wall. It was just past 5 in the morning. The sun would be rising soon. Bradley would be waking up on that yacht, likely hungover, reaching for his phone to check his stocks or order breakfast. "He doesn't know," I said quietly. "He thinks he is still the king of the world." Catherine smirked a razor-sharp expression that was devoid of humor. "That is the best part of the hunt, Douglas. The moment before the trap snaps shut." Ms. Klein handed me a printed confirmation of the change. "Mr. Sterling, I will inform the security team at the front desk. Do you have a photo of Mr. Coulter?" I pulled out my phone. I didn't use a wedding photo. I used the screenshot I had taken an hour ago, the one of him laughing on the yacht, champagne in hand. "Use this one," I said. "It captures his true nature." As Ms. Klein took the phone to scan the image into the security system, I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a notification from my bank app. Omega Protocol, Stage 1 complete. Primary assets locked. I looked at Catherine. The hospital is ours. The money is gone. Now we wait for him to realize he is drowning. "Let's go get some coffee," Catherine said, smoothing her jacket. "It is going to be a very entertaining morning." We walked back toward the waiting room, leaving the administration desk behind. The beep of the monitors in the distance didn't sound like a countdown anymore. It sounded like a heartbeat. Strong, steady, and protected. The surgery doors swung open down the hall, and a nurse gave me a thumbs up. They were starting. My daughter was fighting for her life on the operating table, surrounded by the best surgeons money could buy. And her husband was about to wake up to a world where his money couldn't buy a bottle of water. I sat down, crossing my arms. I closed my eyes for a moment, visualizing the map of Los Angeles. I pictured the marina. I pictured the invisible digital walls slamming down around the yacht, turning his paradise into a prison. Run, Bradley, I thought. Run as fast as you can. You are already dead. You just haven't fallen over yet. I walked out to the hospital courtyard, where the early morning air was thick with mist. The sun was just beginning to bruise the horizon, turning the sky a deep, angry purple. It was the perfect lighting for what I was about to do. I sat on a concrete bench, the dampness seeping through my jeans, and dialed a number that was programmed into my phone as strictly emergency only. It wasn't a customer service line. It was the direct encrypted line to Jonathan Thorne, the Senior Vice President of Private Wealth at Sterling Global Bank. Jonathan picked up on the first ring. It was 5 a.m. in New York, but men like Jonathan never really sleep. They just wait for money to move. Mr. Sterling, Jonathan said, his voice smooth and instantly alert. To what do I owe the pleasure at this hour? I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I watched a delivery truck backing into the hospital loading dock, the beep of its reverse gear syncing with the pounding of my heart. Initiate the solvency clause. Jonathan, account number Delta 94. The target is Bradley Coulter. I want a total asset freeze. Checking savings, investment portfolios, and credit lines. There was a pause followed by the sound of rapid typing. Sir, that is a comprehensive freeze. Mr. Coulter has significant liquidity moving through the joint accounts right now. I see a pending transaction for a lease renewal on a McLaren and a substantial charge at a marine charter service. Kill them, I said. Kill them all. Mark the accounts as under fraud investigation. Flag his social security number for identity theft review. I want his financial footprint erased from the digital world. I want him to be a ghost. Understood, Jonathan said. I am overriding the security protocols now. I am revoking his secondary authorization on the trust accounts. I am canceling the Platinum Amex, the Black Card, and the corporate Visa. How long until it hits the terminals? I asked. The typing stopped. It is done, Mr. Sterling. As of this second, Bradley Coulter does not have access to a single penny. I hung up the phone. I leaned back against the cold concrete and closed my eyes. I let my mind drift 20 miles west to the shimmering waters of the Pacific Ocean. I could see it as clearly as if I were standing there. The yacht was named the Golden Horizon. It was 120 feet of fiberglass arrogance floating in the marina. The bass from the speakers was thumping so hard it vibrated the champagne flutes on the teak deck. Bradley was standing on the bow, his shirt unbuttoned to his navel, the wind whipping through his hair. He looked like a god of the New World. He was surrounded by 20 of his closest sycophants, people who loved him for the picking up the tab. Let's keep this party going, Bradley shouted over the music, raising a magnum of Dom Perignon. He turned to the waiter, a young man in a crisp white uniform who was holding a silver tray. Keep them coming, another round, and bring out the caviar service, the beluga. The waiter nodded, a professional smile plastered on his face. Right away, Mr. Coulter. That will be another $12,000 for the vintage stock. We just need to settle the current tab before we open the reserve cellar. Bradley laughed, a sound that was half joy, half manic ego. He reached into the back pocket of his linen trousers and pulled out the black card. It was heavy, made of anodized titanium. He slapped it onto the waiter's tray with a flourish. Put it on the plastic, my friend. Add a 20% tip for yourself. The waiter bowed and walked over to the portable card terminal set up on the bar. Bradley turned back to Crystal, pulling her close. He whispered something in her ear about buying her a matching car to go with the yacht. She giggled, tracing the line of his jaw, drunk on the proximity to wealth. I could feel the signal traveling through the air. the invisible digital handshake between the card terminal on the yacht and the server in New York. The waiter swiped the card. The machine beeped. A yellow light flashed. Processing. Bradley was doing a little dance move, shimmying his shoulders, completely oblivious. He was thinking about the Instagram likes. He was thinking about the envy of his peers. Then the machine made a sound. A low, dissonant buzz. The waiter frowned. He looked at the screen. He pulled the card out and wiped the chip on his apron. He inserted it again. Processing. Buzz. Declined. The waiter cleared his throat. The music seemed to drop in volume, though nobody had touched the dial. Mr. Coulter Bradley spun around a glass in his hand. "What is the champagne ready?" "Sir." The card was declined. Bradley froze. The smile didn't leave his face immediately. It just curdled, turning into a confused grimace. He let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Don't be ridiculous. That card has no limit. It's the satellite signal. The chip is probably wet." "Run it again." The waiter, losing a fraction of his deference, ran it again. He held the machine up so Bradley could see the screen. The red letters were bright in the morning sun. "Do not honor." Bradley's face flushed a deep, ugly red. He could feel the eyes of his guests on him. The dancing had stopped. Crystal took a half step back, her survival instincts kicking in. Here, Bradley stammered, his hand shaking as he reached for his wallet. "Use the Visa. It's my business account. There is $500,000 in there." He threw the Visa card at the waiter. The waiter inserted it. He didn't even have to wait 3 seconds. Declined. Code 05. Seize card. The waiter looked up, his expression hardening. "Sir, this card has been flagged stolen. I have to keep it." "Stolen," Bradley screamed, his voice cracking. "I am the owner. I am Bradley Coulter. Do you know who I am? Call your manager. This is a glitch, a system failure." The guests were whispering now. The circle around him widened. The smell of expensive perfume was suddenly overpowered by the smell of desperation. "Sir," the waiter said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "The bill is $42,000. We need a valid form of payment immediately, or I will have to radio the harbor police." Bradley ripped his wallet open. He pulled out the corporate Amex. Declined. He pulled out his debit card. Declined. He pulled out a gas station credit card. Declined. He stood there surrounded by 5 useless pieces of plastic. The sun beat down on him, stripping away the glamour, leaving only a sweating, panicked man in an unbuttoned shirt. He looked at his friends, the people who had been toasting him 5 minutes ago. "Guys," he said, his voice trembling, "there is a fraud lock on my accounts. My bank is being paranoid because I'm traveling. Can someone spot me? I will wire you double tomorrow." "Seriously?" Dave looked at his shoes. Mike suddenly found something very interesting on the horizon. Nobody moved. Nobody reached for their wallet. They were sharks just like him. And sharks don't feed other sharks. They eat the wounded. Crystal was the first to speak. She picked up her designer bag from the lounger. "I think I am going to call an Uber," she said, her voice flat. "This is embarrassing, Brad." "No, wait, baby," Bradley pleaded, reaching for her. "It's just a mistake. Don't touch me," she snapped, stepping out of his reach. The waiter crossed his arms. The captain of the yacht had come down from the bridge, standing behind the bar with a look of thunder. "Cash, Mr. Coulter," the captain said. "Now, or we dock and the police will be waiting." Bradley looked into his wallet. The leather billfold that usually held stacks of hundreds was thin. He dug his fingers in past the useless credit cards. He pulled out a crumpled wad of bills. He counted them, his hands shaking so badly he dropped a 20 on the wet deck. 100, 200, $240. That was it. That was the sum total of his empire. He looked at the pile of cash, then at the bill for $42,000. He looked at the faces of his guests, which had turned from admiration to disgust. "This isn't happening," he whispered. Back at the hospital, I opened my eyes. A cold wind blew through the courtyard, rustling the leaves of the palm trees. I took a sip of my coffee. It was bitter black and absolutely delicious. I picked up my phone and texted Jonathan at the bank. Did he try to run the cards? The reply came instantly. 7 attempts, all denied. The merchant has flagged the transaction as high risk. Good, I whispered to the empty bench. I stood up and walked back toward the ICU. My daughter was in surgery fighting a battle of flesh and blood. But I had just won the war of numbers. Bradley Coulter was stranded on a boat he couldn't pay for, with friends who didn't care holding $240 and a handful of plastic that was worth less than the ice melting in his bucket. The octopus had been delimbed. Now I just had to wait for him to wash ashore. The automatic doors at the end of the corridor didn't just open. They were practically thrown off their tracks. I didn't need to look up from the floor tiles to know who had arrived. I could hear the frantic, uneven footsteps of someone wearing expensive loafers on a polished surface slipping slightly with every third step. It was the walk of a man who was trying to run, but didn't have the coordination to pull it off. Then came the smell. Hospitals have a very specific scent profile. They smell of bleach rubbing alcohol-filtered air and quiet anxiety. It is a clean, sharp smell. But the moment Bradley Coulter burst into the waiting area outside the surgical wing, he brought the stench of a frat party with him. It hit me like a physical wave. It was a nauseating cocktail of stale champagne that had dried on his clothes, the salty tang of ocean water, and a heavy cloying layer of cheap coconut-scented body spray. It was the scent of a man who had been sweating out alcohol under the sun for 6 hours and tried to cover it up with something he found in a teenager's beach bag. I remained seated in the corner, partially obscured by a large potted fern. I wanted to watch the performance before I made my presence known. I wanted to see the artist at work. Bradley didn't see me. His eyes were bloodshot, darting around the room with a manic energy that he was trying desperately to channel into grief. He spotted a nurse coming out of the administrative office, not the same nurse from earlier, but a younger woman who looked startled by his appearance. "Where is she?" Bradley bellowed, his voice cracking. He threw his hands up in the air, a gesture that was too wide, too theatrical. "Where is my wife? I need to see Sarah." The nurse took a step back, her nose wrinkling slightly as the cloud of coconut and booze reached her. "Sir, please lower your voice. This is a quiet zone. Who are you looking for?" "I am her husband," Bradley screamed, grabbing the front of his unbuttoned linen shirt as if he were about to tear it open in agony. "I am Bradley Coulter. I just got off a plane. I flew through a storm to get here. Tell me she is okay. Tell me you haven't. Tell me she is at peace." I watched him closely. His shirt was indeed wrinkled, but not from a plane ride. It was stained with what looked like shrimp cocktail sauce near the collar. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was a windblown disaster. He was trying to sell the image of a frantic husband rushing from the airport, but he looked exactly like what he was, a drunk who had been dragged away from a party he didn't want to leave. The nurse checked her tablet. "Mrs. Coulter is currently in surgery, sir. Dr. Evans took her in about 40 minutes ago." Bradley froze. The theatrical grief vanished for a split second, replaced by genuine horror. But it wasn't the horror of a man afraid his wife might die. It was the horror of a man realizing his plan had gone off the rails. "Surgery," he repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Who authorized surgery? I didn't sign anything. I explicitly told Dr. Evans to wait for my arrival." He lunged toward the nurse, invading her personal space. "Why are you torturing her?" he shouted, spit flying from his mouth. "She is weak. Her heart is failing. Why would you cut her open again? Why can't you just let her go with dignity? That is what she wanted. She told me she didn't want extraordinary measures." I felt my blood turn into ice water. I knew my daughter better than anyone. Sarah fought for everything. She fought for her grades, she fought for her career, and she certainly fought for her life. She had never, not once, said she wanted to give up. This was Bradley projecting his own desire for a quick payout onto her voiceless body. He was putting on a masterclass in gaslighting. He wiped a hand across his eyes, smearing sweat and grime across his forehead. "You people are monsters," he sobbed. But there were no tears. It was a dry, heaving sound. "You are keeping her alive to bill the insurance, aren't you? You are butchering my poor Sarah just to pad your invoices. I want it stopped. Go in there and tell them to stop. I am the husband. I say enough is enough." He grabbed the nurse's shoulder. It was a mistake. I stood up. My knees popped slightly, the only sound I made as I emerged from the shadow of the fern. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I walked toward him with the heavy, inevitable momentum of a freight train. "Get your hands off her, Bradley." The sound of my voice hit him harder than a punch. He spun around, losing his balance on the slick floor and stumbling against the wall. He looked at me, blinking his brain, trying to process the impossibility of my presence. In his mind, I was supposed to be freezing on a ranch in Montana, waiting for a phone call to tell me my daughter was dead. "Doug," he stammered. He looked me up and down. He saw the boots. He saw the flannel shirt. He saw the face of the man he had mocked to his friends on the yacht not 2 hours ago. What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice trembling. I thought you were in Montana." I stopped 3 feet away from him. The smell was even worse up close. It was the smell of corruption. "I walked," I said simply. Bradley straightened up, trying to regain his composure. He smoothed his shirt instinctively, trying to cover the stains. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "Oh, Doug, thank God you are here." He tried to step forward to hug me. I didn't move back. I just looked at him with eyes so cold they could have frozen the Pacific. He stopped, sensing the danger. "It has been a nightmare, Doug," he said, launching back into his script. "The flight from Dubai was hell. I haven't slept in 48 hours. I came straight here. I didn't even have time to shower. And now these doctors. They are defying my orders. They are hurting her, Doug. We have to stop them. We have to let her rest." He looked at me with pleading eyes, the eyes of a con artist trying to close the biggest deal of his life. "She is in pain, Doug. We can't be selfish. We have to let her go." I looked at the Rolex on his wrist. It was still there. He hadn't noticed yet that the police had confiscated his car keys outside, or maybe he had come in through a side entrance. He didn't know about the bank. He didn't know about the trust. He thought he was just managing a grieving father. "You are right, Bradley," I said, my voice low and even. "Someone is definitely going to be released today." He nodded eagerly, thinking he had me on the hook. "Exactly. Thank you for understanding. It is what Sarah would have wanted." I took a step closer, invading his space until I could see the broken capillaries in his eyes. "I wasn't talking about Sarah," I whispered. Before he could ask what I meant, the elevator doors behind him pinged open. He turned, expecting perhaps a doctor he could bully. But it wasn't a doctor. It was 2 officers from the Los Angeles Police Department, and behind them, holding a very thick file, was Catherine Vance. Bradley's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The fake tears evaporated instantly. The mask slipped, and for the first time since he walked in, I saw the real Bradley Coulter. He looked like a rat that had just realized the cheese was wired to a bomb. I stepped fully out of the alcove, letting the fluorescent lights of the hallway hit my face. The hum of the hospital ventilation system seemed to drop away, leaving only the tension between us. It was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. Bradley stood there, his chest heaving, his eyes darting from the police officers to Catherine, and finally landing on me. In his twisted logic, he decided that I was the weak link in the chain. He decided that the old man from Montana was the only thing standing between him and his freedom, And he thought he could bully me into submission, just like he had bullied my daughter for 5 years. He straightened his spine, attempting to summon the arrogance that had served him so well in boardrooms and VIP lounges. He looked at my boots scuffed with mud from the ranch. He looked at my flannel shirt worn at the elbows. He looked at my hands calloused and rough. And then he sneered. It was a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. "You brought the circus, Doug?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Is that what this is? You couldn't handle the situation like a man, so you brought lawyers and cops to a family tragedy." I didn't answer. I just watched him. I watched the sweat beading on his upper lip. "Look at you," he continued, emboldened by my silence. "You look like you just crawled out of a barn. Did you even fly here, Doug, or did you take a Greyhound bus to save $50? I bet you sat in economy class, knees jammed against the seat, eating peanuts while I was trying to secure millions for your daughter's future." He took a step closer, the smell of stale alcohol wafting off him in waves. "You have no idea how the world works, do you, old man? You think you can just waltz into Los Angeles and dictate terms to me? I am Bradley Coulter. I manage portfolios worth more than your entire zip code. I have friends in this city who could buy and sell your little farm before breakfast. You are out of your depth. You are a peasant trying to play king, and it is embarrassing." He laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "Go home, Doug. Go back to your cows and your tractors. Let the adults handle the finances and the medical decisions. You are making a fool of yourself. Do you really think these officers are going to arrest me? I will have their badges by morning. I will sue this hospital into the ground. And you, I will make sure you never see Sarah again. I will bury you in legal fees so deep you won't be able to afford the heating bill next winter." I listened to every word. I let the insults wash over me. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a strange kind of pity. He was a man standing on the edge of a cliff, convinced he could fly, unaware that I had already cut his parachute cords. "Are you done?" I asked softly. He blinked, surprised by the calmness of my voice. "I am done when I say I am done," he snapped. "Now call off your dogs. Tell the lawyer to tear up that paper and tell the cops to leave. I need to go in there and make sure my wife isn't suffering." I reached into the large front pocket of my jacket. Bradley flinched, perhaps thinking I was reaching for a weapon. In a way, I was. I pulled out the iPad. It was Sarah's old one, the one she used to FaceTime me on Sundays before he forced her to stop. I had synced it with my phone earlier. I walked over to the small table in the waiting area, pushing aside a stack of old magazines. I placed the iPad down with a deliberate thud. I tapped the screen. The video began to play. The sound was jarring in the quiet hallway. The heavy bass of electronic dance music echoed off the sterile walls, the shrieks of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and then Bradley's voice booming and joyful. "To the future. To the upgrade, bye-bye baggage." Bradley froze. His face went from flushed to a sickly shade of gray. He stared at the screen as if it were a portal to hell. He watched himself kissing Crystal. He watched himself dancing. He watched the timestamp in the corner of the video glowing bright and undeniable. I paused the video on the frame where he was holding the magnum of champagne, his head thrown back in ecstasy. "The video was taken 2 hours ago," I said, "while Sarah was going into cardiac arrest, while the doctors were paging you, while your son was asking why Daddy was a pirate." Bradley looked up at me. The arrogance was gone, replaced by frantic desperation. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an excuse. That is old footage," he stammered. "That is from last summer. I just reposted it. It was a throwback." I swiped the screen. I brought up the metadata. Date created today. Location Marina del Rey. Device iPhone 15 Pro Max. He swallowed hard. He looked at Catherine, who was writing something in her notebook. He looked at the police officers whose hands were resting near their belts. "Okay, fine," he yelled, throwing his hands up. "So I was on a boat, so what? Do you know the pressure I am under, Doug? Do you have any idea what it is like to watch your wife wither away for months? I needed a break. I needed to decompress. He pointed a shaking finger at me. It was a networking event. Those people on that boat, they are potential investors. I was working, Doug. I was trying to raise capital to pay for her medical bills because her insurance is garbage. I was sacrificing my mental health to secure her future. And yes, maybe I had a drink. Maybe I tried to smile. Is that a crime? Is it a crime to try to feel human for one afternoon while my life is falling apart? He was panting now, his face slick with sweat. He actually believed his own lie. He had rewritten the narrative in real time to make himself the victim. And Crystal, I asked. The woman in the bikini. The one you kissed, was she an investor too? Bradley flinched. She is a colleague. She was comforting me. It was a moment of weakness. I was vulnerable, Doug. I was grieving. You are twisting everything to make me look like a monster. He turned to the police officers, pleading his case to them. You see this is what I have to deal with. A vindictive father-in-law who hates me because I am successful. He is trying to frame me. He hacked my phone. This is entrapment. I picked up the iPad. I turned it off. The silence returned heavier than before. You are right about one thing, Bradley. I said, I am a peasant. I am a farmer. And on the farm we know exactly what to do with a rabid animal that attacks the herd. I turned to Catherine. He admits he was there. He admits he ignored the calls. He admits he prioritized a party over his wife's life. Is that enough? Catherine snapped her notebook shut. The sound echoed like a gavel strike. More than enough, she said. Bradley looked between us, confusion clouding his eyes. Enough for what? What are you talking about? I stepped closer to him until I could see the fear pulsing in his neck. Enough to know that you didn't just abandon her, Bradley. You celebrated her death before she had even taken her last breath. And you did it on a yacht that my company owns. Bradley's jaw dropped. Your company. I nodded. Did you really think a 28-year-old charter captain owned a 100-foot vessel that is a holding of Sterling Logistics? You rented it from me, Bradley. You paid me to host the party where you cheated on my daughter. And since the payment was declined this morning, you are also guilty of theft of services. Grand larceny. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. You called me a peasant, but you forgot one thing. Farmers own the land. We own the food. We own the foundation. You are just a parasite living on the crops I grew, and the harvest is over. Bradley stepped back, his legs hitting the bench behind him. He looked at the iPad, then at me. The reality of his situation was finally crashing down on him. The money was gone. The lies were exposed. The audience was hostile. But the insurance, he whispered almost to himself. The policy. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Oh, don't worry about the policy. I read that too. Section 8, paragraph C, the Slayer Rule. If the beneficiary contributes to the death or endangerment of the insured, they get nothing. I signaled to the officers. Get him out of my sight. He smells like garbage. You are right, Bradley. You are absolutely right. The farm is a quiet place. We don't have yachts. We don't have champagne parties on Tuesday mornings. But we do have something else. We have a very clear understanding of the difference between a sick animal that needs mercy and a predator that needs to be put down. Bradley stared at me, his chest heaving. The exposure of his affair and his lies hadn't humbled him. It had done the opposite. It had stripped away the veneer of civilization and revealed the desperate cornered animal underneath. A cornered animal doesn't surrender. It attacks. He looked at the iPad, then at the police officers who were watching him with crossed arms, and then his eyes snapped to the double doors of the surgical unit. At that exact moment, the doors swung open. Dr. Evans stepped out. He looked exhausted. His surgical cap was pulled low, and there were sweat stains on his scrubs. He pulled down his mask, revealing a grim expression. "Family of Sarah Coulter?" he asked. Bradley didn't walk. He lunged. He practically shoved me aside to get to the doctor first. He grabbed Dr. Evans's arm with a grip that looked painful. "Doctor, is she gone? Please tell me. Is it over?" The hope in his voice was sickening. He wasn't asking for reassurance that she was alive. He was begging for confirmation that she was dead. He needed a corpse. A corpse couldn't file for divorce. A corpse couldn't testify about the emotional abuse. A corpse was a $5 million payout and a clean slate. Dr. Evans pulled his arm away, stepping back. He looked at Bradley with a mixture of professional detachment and personal distaste. "Mrs. Coulter survived the procedure," he said. Bradley's face fell. It was a micro-expression lasting only a fraction of a second, but I saw it. It was pure, unadulterated disappointment. "Oh," he said, his voice flat. She made it. We managed to repair the valve." Dr. Evans continued, ignoring the tone. "Her heart is beating on its own, though the rhythm is still fragile. She is in a medically induced coma to help her brain recover from the oxygen deprivation. The next 24 hours are critical." Bradley ran a hand through his messy hair. I could see the gears turning in his head. He was calculating. If she was in a coma, she was still vulnerable. She couldn't speak. She couldn't sign checks. He was still the husband. He still held the power. Or so he thought. "Doctor, listen to me," Bradley said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was loud enough for everyone to hear. "We need to be realistic. I know my wife, I know Sarah. She's terrified of being a burden. We had this conversation 1,000 times. She told me, Brad, if I ever end up hooked to machines, if I am ever just a vegetable waiting to rot, I want you to let me go." He placed a hand on his chest, mimicking a heartbroken lover. "It kills me to say this. God, it rips my heart out. But we cannot let her suffer. If there is brain damage, if she is going to spend the rest of her life in a bed, that isn't living. That is torture. I cannot let you do that to her." Dr. Evans frowned. "Mr. Coulter, it is too early to determine the extent of neurological damage. She needs time." "Time?" Bradley shouted, suddenly aggressive again. "Time to what? To rack up $1 million hospital bill, to keep her alive as a science experiment? No! I am her husband. I am her legal proxy. I am making the decision right now." He pointed a shaking finger at the double doors. "I want you to extubate her. I want you to turn off the machines and let nature take its course. It is the humane thing to do. It is what she wanted. Do it now, or I will sue this hospital for battery and prolonging suffering." I felt a surge of rage so powerful my vision blurred at the edges. He wasn't asking for mercy. He was ordering an execution. I took a step forward, my hands curling into fists. But before I could reach him, a hand touched my arm. It was Catherine. She stepped past me. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. She adjusted her glasses and walked right up to Bradley, interposing herself between him and the doctor. "Mr. Coulter," she said, her voice cutting through his hysteria like a scalpel, "you seem to be under a significant misapprehension regarding your authority in this building." Bradley sneered at her. "Who are you, the old man's lawyer? Get out of my face. This is between a husband and his wife's doctor. You have no standing here." "Actually," Catherine said, opening the thick file she had been carrying, "I have all the standing." She pulled out a document stamped with a heavy red seal. She didn't hand it to Bradley. She held it up for Dr. Evans to see. "Doctor, this is a certified copy of an emergency ex parte order issued by the Superior Court of Los Angeles County at 4:30 this morning. Docket number 7729. Bradley tried to snatch the paper. Catherine pulled it back with the reflexes of a viper. "Don't touch the evidence, Bradley." She turned back to the doctor. "This order serves two purposes. First, it immediately strips Bradley Coulter of all medical decision-making powers regarding Sarah Sterling Coulter. The court has found sufficient evidence of spousal abandonment and malicious intent." "Malicious intent," Bradley shrieked. "That is slander." "I was working," Catherine ignored him. Second, the order appoints Mr. Douglas Sterling as the sole temporary guardian of the patient. Mr. Coulter is hereby legally restrained from entering the patient's room or directing her care in any capacity. If he attempts to interfere with life-saving treatment, he is in contempt of court. She turned to the two police officers who had been watching silently. "Officers, Mr. Coulter is currently violating the terms of a restraining order that is attached to this document. He is demanding the cessation of life support for a protected person. In legal terms, that is attempted manslaughter." The officers stepped forward. One of them reached for the handcuffs on his belt. Bradley looked at the cops, then at the document, then at me. His face was a mask of disbelief. He couldn't process it. In his world, money fixed everything. In his world, he was the golden boy. "You cannot do this," he screamed, backing away until he hit the wall. "Do you know who I am? I am a partner at Coulter Capital. I have lawyers who eat people like you for lunch." He pointed at me, his finger shaking violently. "You think a piece of paper stops me? I pay the bills, Doug. I pay for this hospital. I pay for her insurance. Without me, that machine turns off anyway because you can't afford the electricity." He was laughing now, a manic, broken sound. "Go ahead, arrest me. I will be out on bail in an hour. And then I will cut off the funding. I will freeze the accounts. I will make sure not a single dime goes to this hospital until you beg me to come back." I watched him rant. It was pathetic. He was threatening me with money he no longer had. He was wielding a sword that had already been melted down. "Bradley," I said, speaking for the first time since the doctor appeared. He stopped panting and looked at me. "You don't pay the bills, son. You haven't paid a bill since you met my daughter." "What are you talking about?" "I make $500,000 a year. You made $0 last year," I corrected him. "I saw your tax returns when we audited the trust this morning. You have been living off the supplementary credit line attached to Sarah's inheritance. You thought it was your genius investment income. It was my money funneled through her account to keep you feeling important." I took a step closer. "And as for your lawyers, you can't afford them." Bradley stared at me. "Of course I can. I have millions in the Cayman account." I shook my head slowly. "No, you don't. You have a negative balance. Because 10 minutes ago, the bank exercised the cross-collateralization clause on your business loans. They seized the offshore accounts to cover the domestic debt." I pointed to the phone in his pocket. "Check your balance, Bradley. Go ahead. Show the officers how rich you are." Bradley's hand went to his pocket. He hesitated. The confidence was cracking, replaced by a dawn of absolute terror. He pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over the banking app. He tapped it. I watched his face. I watched the color drain out of it until he looked like a ghost. I didn't need to see the screen to know what it said. It said 0, or worse. This is a glitch," he whispered. "It is not a glitch," I said. "It is an eviction. You are done." Catherine nodded to the officers. "Take him." The officer grabbed Bradley's wrist. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. "No," Bradley screamed, struggling as they spun him around. "You can't do this." "I am Bradley Coulter." "Not anymore," I said, as they dragged him toward the elevator. "Now you are just a number in the county system." I watched the elevator doors close on his screaming face. Then finally, I turned to Dr. Evans. "Save my daughter, doctor. I will handle the rest." The hallway was already crowded with the uniformed officers who were holding Bradley, but the arrival of the elevator brought a new kind of tension into the air. The doors slid open with a heavy metallic hum, revealing 3 men in dark tailored suits. They didn't walk like patrol officers. They walked with the quiet, predatory confidence of men who hunted with calculators and subpoenas rather than tasers. Bradley, who had been struggling against the grip of the patrolman, suddenly stopped. A look of wild, desperate hope washed over his face. In his delusional state, he had convinced himself that the cavalry had arrived. He thought his high-priced legal team had finally woken up, or perhaps his political connections had sent federal agents to rescue him from this nightmare. "Over here," Bradley shouted, his voice cracking with relief. "Thank God." "Are you from the firm? Did Peterson send you?" He tried to shake off the officer holding his left arm. "These local cops are out of their minds." "You need to arrest that man," Bradley yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He is a hacker. He is holding me hostage. He is interfering with a federal banking transaction." The lead detective in the suit ignored Bradley completely. He walked straight past the screaming man and stopped in front of me. He was a man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that had seen every white-collar scam in the book. "Mr. Sterling," the detective said, extending a hand. "I am Detective Miller from the Economic Crimes Unit. We received the digital packet from your lawyer regarding the asset misappropriation. We got here as fast as we could." Bradley went silent. The hope on his face drained away, replaced by a confusion so profound it was almost painful to watch. "Wait," Bradley stammered. You know him." Detective Miller turned slowly to face Bradley. He didn't look impressed. He looked at Bradley the way an exterminator looks at a particularly large cockroach. "Bradley Coulter," the detective said, his voice flat. "You are under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and destruction of private property." "Destruction of property?" Bradley laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "What are you talking about? I didn't break anything. I was at a party?" Detective Miller reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. He unfolded it with deliberate slowness. "We are talking about the Golden Horizon, Mr. Coulter. The 120-foot yacht you have been occupying for the last 24 hours. The one you rented under the pretense of a corporate retreat." "So what?" Bradley spat. "I rented it. I paid $50,000 for the weekend. You can't arrest me for renting a boat." "You didn't pay for it," I interjected quietly. "The payment was declined." "Remember," Bradley glared at me. "That is a bank error. I will sort it out tomorrow. That is a civil matter, not a criminal one. You can't arrest me for a bounced check. It isn't just the rental fee." Detective Miller continued. "We have a report from the harbor master and the captain of the vessel. Apparently, when your credit cards were declined and the captain asked you to leave, your guests didn't take it well. There are reports of bottles being thrown through the salon windows, cigarette burns on the teak deck, and someone, presumably one of your unhappy investors, decided to empty a fire extinguisher into the engine control room." Bradley turned pale. That wasn't me. That was Mike. He got drunk. I can't be held responsible for what my guests do." "You signed the rental agreement," Miller said. "You assumed full liability for the vessel and all passengers. The preliminary damage assessment is just over $200,000. $200,000. Bradley choked. "That is insane." "It's a few scratches." "And then there is the matter of the theft," Miller added. "The captain reports that several bottles of rare vintage wine valued at $12,000 each are missing from the ship's reserve cellar. Witnesses say you were handing them out like party favors." Bradley was hyperventilating now. The walls were closing in from every side. "Fine," he screamed. "I will pay for it. I will write a check right now." "Just let me go to my office." "You can't write a check, Bradley," I said. "You don't have any money." He spun on me. "Stop saying that. I have assets. I have the yacht deposit." "You don't have a deposit," I said. "And you don't understand the worst part of this joke, do you? I took a step closer to him. The police officers tightened their grip, but I signaled them to wait. I wanted him to hear this. I wanted him to understand the absolute totality of his failure. "Who do you think owns the Golden Horizon, Bradley?" He looked at me confused. "I don't know. West Coast Charters. Some shell company." I nodded. "West Coast Charters. And do you know who owns West Coast Charters?" He stared at me. The realization hit him slowly like a dark cloud creeping across the sun. "No," he whispered. "No way." "West Coast Charters is a wholly owned subsidiary of Sterling Logistics," I said. "I bought that company 3 years ago to entertain clients from Asia. It is my boat, Bradley." The color left his face completely. He looked like he was going to vomit. You set me up." "I didn't set you up," I said. "You rented the biggest, flashiest yacht in the marina because you wanted to look like a king. You didn't bother to check the ownership because you never do your due diligence. You just saw a shiny toy and pulled out a credit card that I pay for." I leaned in close. "You were drinking my champagne. You were sleeping in my master suite. You were cheating on my daughter on my deck. And now you have trashed my property." I turned to Detective Miller. "I want to press full charges, Detective. Every broken glass. Every scratch on the paint. I want him charged for the theft of the wine, the unauthorized use of the vessel, and the vandalism." Miller nodded. "We have already contacted the district attorney. Given the flight risk he demonstrated by claiming to be in Dubai, bail will be set exceedingly high." Bradley looked at the detective, then at me. His eyes were wide with terror. The reality of prison was finally sinking in. He wasn't going to a white-collar resort. He was going to county lockup, and he was going there broke. "Doug, please," he whimpered. The fight gone, the arrogance evaporated. "Doug, I am family. You can't send me to prison. Think of Leo. Think of your grandson. He needs his father." I felt a coldness in my chest that terrified even me. "Leo thinks his father is a pirate," I said softly. "Pirates end up hanging from the gallows, Bradley. That is the story." I checked my watch. "Take him away." "Wait, no!" Bradley screamed as they began to drag him down the hall. "Sarah." "Let me talk to Sarah. She won't let you do this." The elevator doors opened. The officers shoved him inside. The suits followed. As the doors began to close, Bradley lunged forward, his face pressed against the gap. "I will sue you. I will kill you. This isn't over." The doors slammed shut, cutting off his scream. Silence returned to the hallway. I stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of the hospital. It was done. The parasite had been removed. I turned back to the waiting room window. The sun had fully risen now. The light was hitting the Hollywood Hills in the distance. It was a beautiful morning. My phone buzzed. It was Catherine. "He is in custody. The press release is going out now. Coulter Capital is officially under investigation for Ponzi scheme allegations. By noon, his name will be mud." I typed a reply. "Good." "What about the house?" Catherine's reply came instantly. "Locks are being changed as we speak. I have a team packing his personal effects. We will send them to the county jail storage." I put the phone in my pocket. I felt a heavy exhaustion settling into my bones, but it was a good kind of tired. It was the tiredness of a man who had built a fence to keep the wolves out and had finished just before dark. I walked back toward the ICU doors. I needed to see my daughter. I needed to tell her that the monster under the bed was gone. I needed to tell her that the yacht had sailed and her husband had gone down with the ship. But first I stopped at the vending machine. I bought a black coffee. It tasted like burnt plastic, but after the taste of victory, it was the sweetest thing I had ever drunk. I sat down in the chair outside her room. I watched the heart monitor through the glass. Beep, beep, beep. Stronger now. Steady. You rest, sweetheart, I whispered to the glass. Daddy took out the trash. The hallway of the hospital had transformed into a courtroom, a bank vault, and a prison cell all at once. The air was thick with the static of police radios and the heavy, suffocating scent of a man's life falling apart. Bradley was pressed against the wall, the handcuffs biting into his wrists, but his mouth was still moving. He was still trying to negotiate his way out of an avalanche. You can't take my personal effects, he spat at the officer, who was patting him down. That is a violation of my civil rights. I need my phone to call my attorney. I need my wallet to post bail. You are making a huge mistake. Detective Miller didn't even blink. He reached into Bradley's front pocket and pulled out the slim leather card holder. He tossed it into a plastic evidence bag held by a junior officer. Then he reached for Bradley's left wrist. The Rolex. It wasn't just a watch to Bradley. It was his talisman. It was the Daytona model, a piece of steel and gold that he polished more often than he touched his wife. I watched his eyes widen as the detective's fingers closed around the clasp. No, wait, Bradley stammered, pulling his arm back. That's a gift. You can't seize gifts. That's worth $40,000. It's fragile. Don't scratch it. Miller unclasped the watch with a practiced, indifferent motion. The heavy timepiece slid off Bradley's wrist, leaving a band of pale, untanned skin that looked strangely vulnerable. Into the bag, Miller said. Bradley looked at his naked wrist, and for the first time he looked small. Without the watch, without the wallet, without the yacht, he was shrinking before my eyes. And the keys, Miller added. Bradley froze. What keys? The vehicle you arrived in. The Porsche 911. We ran the plates. It's parked in the emergency loading zone. Bradley's face contorted. You are impounding my car for a parking violation. Just write me a ticket. I'll pay the fine. Don't touch the car. Miller shook his head slowly. We aren't towing it for a parking violation, Mr. Coulter. We are seizing it as an asset involved in the commission of a crime. And because we have a repo order on file. Repo order, Bradley shrieked. The laugh that bubbled up in his throat sounded like hysteria. I leased that car. The payments are up to date. I paid it last month. I took a step forward. The sound of my boots on the linoleum was the only thing that cut through Bradley's panic. You paid it last month, I said calmly. But you didn't pay it this morning. Bradley whipped his head around to look at me. What are you talking about, Doug? It's on autopay. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a court order this time. It was a transaction receipt from Sterling Global Bank. You really don't understand how debt works when you play in the big leagues, do you, son? I walked up to him close enough to see the sweat dripping down his temple. At 8 o'clock this morning, when your credit card started declining on the yacht, a flag went up in the central banking system. It signaled a liquidity crisis. Usually the bank would give you a grace period. They would call you. They would send a letter. I paused, letting the silence stretch. But they didn't do that today. Do you know why Bradley stared at me, his mouth slightly open? Because at 8:05 this morning, a private holding company purchased your entire debt portfolio from the bank. Every dime you owe. The mortgage on the house you thought was yours. The lease on the Porsche. The personal line of credit you used to buy those suits. I tapped the paper against his chest. I bought it all, Bradley. I bought your debt for cents on the dollar because the bank considered you a toxic asset. And as the new holder of your debt, I have the right to call in the loans immediately if I suspect insolvency. I leaned in closer. And guess what? I suspect insolvency. Bradley looked at me with horror. The realization was crashing down on him like a tidal wave. He wasn't just arrested. He was owned. You own my debt. I own you, I corrected him. I am your creditor, Bradley. I am the man you owe $2.5 million to, and since you have $0 in your account, I am exercising my right to seize collateral. I pointed to the evidence bag where the Rolex was sitting. That watch. It's mine now. It goes toward the interest on your personal loan. I pointed to the door. That Porsche outside mine. I'm taking it back. It will look nice in my barn next to the tractor. Bradley started to shake. It wasn't the cold. It was the absolute crushing weight of total defeat. But my clothes, he whispered. I looked at his stained linen shirt and his designer trousers. Technically, you put those on the Amex last month and you haven't paid the bill. So yes, in a court of law, I could strip you naked right here in this hallway. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. But I'm a generous man. You can keep the shirt. It suits you. It's dirty cheap and falling apart. Just like you. Detective Miller cleared his throat. We need the keys, Mr. Coulter. Now. Or we add obstruction to the list. Bradley's hand went to his pocket. He moved like a man in a dream, slow and sluggish. He pulled out the key fob. It was sleek black with the golden crest of the car manufacturer. It was the symbol of everything he thought he had achieved. It was his freedom. It was his ego. He held it for a second, his thumb rubbing over the smooth plastic. Please, he whispered, looking at me. Not the car, it's all I have left. I didn't blink. You have nothing left, Bradley. You lost the right to have things when you decided my daughter's life was less important than your lifestyle. I held out my hand. Give it to the detective. Bradley dropped the keys into the evidence bag. The sound of the plastic hitting the other items was final. Detective Miller zipped the bag shut. That's it. Let's go. The officers grabbed Bradley by the arms. This time he didn't fight. He didn't scream. He slumped. His spine seemed to dissolve. He looked at me one last time as they turned him toward the elevator. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, just a hollow, empty shock. He was a man who had woken up in a palace and was going to sleep in a cage, and he still couldn't understand how the world had spun so fast. I watched them drag him away. He dragged his feet, his expensive loafers squeaking on the floor. Doug, he croaked, his voice barely audible. Tell Sarah. Tell her I loved her. I didn't answer. I didn't owe him an answer. The elevator doors opened. They shoved him inside. He looked small in the corner, surrounded by the uniforms. As the doors started to close, I saw him lean his head back against the metal wall and close his eyes. A single tear leaked out, cutting a clean track through the grime on his face. It wasn't a tear for Sarah. It was a tear for the Porsche. The doors shut. I stood alone in the hallway. My heart was beating slow and steady. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, but underneath that I could smell something else. Silence. The silence of a problem solved. The silence of a debt paid in full. I turned to Catherine, who had been watching the whole scene with a look of professional satisfaction. Did we get the house keys? I asked. She nodded, tapping her briefcase. Already secured. The locks are being changed as we speak. Good, I said. I looked at the plastic bag and the detective's hand still visible in my mind. The Rolex. The keys. The wallet. Sell the car, I said to Catherine. Sell the watch. Sell everything he ever touched. And the money she asked. Donate it, I said. To the Heart Foundation. In Sarah's name. I turned and walked back toward my daughter's room. I had one more promise to keep. I had told her I would take care of everything. And for the first time in 5 years, everything was actually going to be okay. The wolf was gone. The shepherd was back on duty. Just as the metal doors were about to seal Bradley inside his steel coffin, I raised my hand. Hold it, I said. The officer inside the elevator pressed the open button. The doors shuddered and retracted. Bradley looked out at me, his eyes wet with self-pity, thinking perhaps I had changed my mind. He thought maybe the concept of family still meant something to me. He thought I was going to offer him a lifeline, or a lawyer, or at least a clean shirt. "You have a visitor, Bradley," I said. I stepped aside. Walking down the corridor was a woman who looked out of place in the sterile hospital environment. It was Crystal. She wasn't wearing the gold bikini from the yacht. She was wearing a trench coat that was buttoned up to her chin and sunglasses that hid her eyes. She was clutching a designer handbag as if it contained nuclear launch codes. Bradley's face went through a complex series of contortions. First relief, then confusion, and finally a dawn of absolute panic. "Crystal," he gasped, pulling against the officer's grip. "Baby, what are you doing here? Did you bring the cash? Did you call my contacts?" He looked at the officers. "This is my witness. She can testify. She will tell you I was just working. Tell them, Crystal. Tell them it was a business meeting." Crystal stopped 5 feet away from the elevator. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, but not from crying over him. They were red from the stress of calculating her own survival odds. She didn't look at Bradley. She looked at me. "Is the deal still on?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded. "The wire transfer cleared 5 minutes ago," I said. $50,000, plus a one-way ticket to Miami, provided you hand over the evidence." Bradley froze. The air seemed to leave his lungs in a sharp hiss. "Deal," he whispered. "What deal, Crystal? What is he talking about?" He lunged forward, straining the handcuffs. "Don't listen to him. He is lying. He is broke. I am the one with the money. Crystal, get out of here. Go, don't say a word." He was barking orders at her like she was a dog. He was trying to chase her away with the sheer force of his personality, hoping that his volume would override her greed. "Get out!" he screamed. "You are fired. You hear me? Get away from him!" I looked at Crystal. I didn't have to shout. I didn't have to threaten. I just gestured with my open hand, inviting her into the circle of judgment. "Come here, Ms. Hayes. The floor is yours." Crystal took a deep breath. She reached into her handbag. She didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a phone. It was Bradley's spare work phone, the one he thought was secure. The one he used for his dirty dealings. "He left this on the boat," Crystal said, her voice gaining strength. "When the police started boarding, he threw it in his bag and told me to hide it. He told me to throw it in the ocean if anyone came asking." Bradley's face turned a color I had never seen on a human being before. It was a pale, translucent green. "You stupid girl," he hissed. "I made you, I bought you that bag. I put you on that yacht. You owe me 6 months of back pay." "Brad," she snapped back. "And you promised me a car that turns out to be leased in your wife's name." I checked the registration in the glove box. She turned to Detective Miller. "He told me he wanted to be free. He told me his wife was the only thing standing between him and the payout." "That is hearsay," Bradley yelled. "She is lying. She is a gold digger." Crystal tapped the screen of the phone. "He sent me voice notes," she said. "He likes the sound of his own voice too much to type." She pressed play. The volume was maxed out. Bradley's voice, slurring slightly with alcohol, echoed through the hospital corridor. It was from 3 days ago. "Crystal, baby, it's almost done. I dropped her off at the ER. The doctor says she is critical. I am going to delay the consent forms. If I drag it out for 48 hours, her heart won't be able to take the strain. Nature will do the heavy lifting for us. Just keep the yacht ready. Once the insurance check clears on Monday, we are disappearing. No more baggage, no more sick wife. Just us and $5 million. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. The officers in the elevator looked at Bradley with a new expression. It wasn't just professional suspicion anymore. It was revulsion. Even criminals have a code, and plotting to kill your sick wife for an insurance payout violated every single line of it. Bradley was shaking. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. There was no spin that could fix this. There was no lie that could cover the sound of his own voice planning a murder. I looked at him. "That isn't negligence, Bradley," I said softly. "That is premeditation. That is conspiracy to commit murder." I turned to Detective Miller. "Does that change the charges?" Detective Miller nodded slowly. "It certainly does. We are adding attempted murder and insurance fraud to the docket, and I am requesting that bail be denied entirely." Bradley looked at Crystal. His eyes were wide, pleading. Why, he whispered. "Why would you do this to me?" Crystal put her sunglasses back on. She looked like a woman who had just walked away from a car crash without a scratch. "Because he offered me $50,000 cash, Brad," she said, pointing at me. "And you offered me a promise from a bankrupt account. I might be a gold digger, but I am not an idiot." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. She didn't look back. She had her money. She had her ticket to Miami. She was a mercenary, and mercenaries go where the currency is hard. I watched her go, then I turned back to Bradley. "You see, son," I said, "you always thought you could buy people. You thought everyone had a price. And you were right. Everyone does have a price." I leaned in close until my face was inches from his. "The difference is I can actually afford to pay it." Bradley slumped against the back wall of the elevator. He looked broken. The last shred of his ego, the last illusion of his control, had just walked out the front door with a check signed by me. "Get him out of here," I said to the officers. "He is making the air hard to breathe." The detective hit the button for the ground floor. The doors slid shut. This time I didn't stop them. I watched the gap narrow until Bradley Coulter's terrified face disappeared forever. I stood alone in the hallway. I felt a vibration in my pocket. I pulled out my phone. It was a notification from the bank. "Transfer complete, $50,000 to Crystal Hayes." I swiped the notification away. It was the best $50,000 I had ever spent. It wasn't blackmail. It was an investment in the truth. And the return on investment was seeing the look on Bradley's face when he realized that the loyalty he thought he commanded was just another rental he couldn't afford. I took a deep breath. The air smelled cleaner now. The stench of coconut and cheap betrayal was fading. I turned back toward the ICU. My daughter was waking up soon, and I had a lot to tell her. But first I needed to make sure the hospital room was filled with flowers. The kind that didn't smell like lies. The elevator doors were trying to close, but Bradley had jammed his expensive loafer between the rubber seals. He was fighting the officers with a renewed maniacal strength. It was the strength of a man who realized he had lost the battle for his freedom, but was still trying to win the war for his retirement. He wasn't screaming about his innocence anymore. He wasn't screaming about the yacht or Crystal. He was screaming about the one thing that had been his holy grail since the day he proposed to my daughter. The policy, Bradley shrieked, his voice echoing off the metal walls of the elevator shaft. "You can arrest me, but you can't touch the policy. It is irrevocable." I checked the statutes. Even if I go to prison, I am the sole beneficiary. He looked at me with wild, bloodshot eyes, a twisted grin forming on his face. $5 million, Doug. That is the payout. And she is going to die. You heard the doctor. She has brain damage. She is weak. Her heart can't take the trauma of a second surgery. When she flatlines, that money is mine. It is untouchable. It goes into a trust you can't access. I will be the richest inmate in the state penitentiary. I will buy the best lawyers. I will appeal until I rot. I win, Doug. In the end, I still win. The officers tried to pull him back, but I signaled them to stop. I wanted him to say it. I wanted him to put it on the record. "You are banking on her death," I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria. "You are standing there in handcuffs praying for your wife to die so you can fund your legal defense." "It is not praying," Bradley spat. "It is economics. It is the return on my investment. I put up with her for 5 years. I put up with you. I earned that premium." I reached into my back pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a folded document. It was on thick bonded paper. It was the original copy of the Sterling family life insurance policy, the one I had purchased for Sarah when she turned 25, long before Bradley Coulter had slithered his way into our lives. I walked up to the elevator doors. I stood just out of reach of his kicking legs. "You really should have read the fine print, Bradley," I said, unfolding the document. "You were always so focused on the zeros at the end of the number that you never bothered to look at the words in the middle." I held the paper up. I pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. "Section 8, paragraph C," I read aloud. "The exclusion of malicious intent, also known in legal circles as the Slayer rule." Bradley stopped struggling. He went very still. "What are you talking about?" he whispered. I continued reading. "If the primary beneficiary is found to be complicit in the death of the insured, or if they have engaged in any action that willfully endangers the life of the insured to accelerate the claim, all rights to the policy are immediately forfeited. The payout is then redirected to the secondary beneficiary or the estate of the deceased." I lowered the paper and looked him in the eye. "You just confessed on camera in front of police officers that you delayed her medical care to let nature take its course. You just confessed that you were waiting for her to die. That is willful endangerment. That is malicious intent." I crumpled the paper in my hand. "The moment those handcuffs went on your wrists for attempted murder, that $5 million vanished. It doesn't belong to you. It never did. Even if Sarah dies in the next 5 minutes, you don't get a dime. You get a life sentence and a court-appointed attorney." Bradley's face crumbled. The last pillar of his delusion collapsed. He slid down the wall of the elevator, his legs giving out. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. "No," he whimpered. "That is not fair. I planned everything. I waited. I was patient." "And that is why you lost," I said. "You were so busy planning her death that you forgot she had a father who was planning for her life." Just then, the double doors of the ICU burst open behind me. I spun around. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was Dr. Evans. He wasn't walking. He was running. His face was flushed. Behind him, a nurse was rushing toward the station, grabbing a phone. My first thought was that Bradley was right. My first thought was that she was gone. I felt a cold wave of terror wash over me that was stronger than any anger I had felt all day. "Doctor," I choked out. "What happened?" Evans stopped in front of me. He took a deep breath. He looked at me and then he smiled. It was a genuine, exhausted, beautiful smile. "Mr. Sterling," he said, "you need to come in now." "Is she—" I couldn't even say the word. "She is waking up," Evans said. The world stopped spinning. "What?" The nurse came running back. "Her vitals just spiked, sir. Positive spike." Her heart rhythm stabilized on its own. She opened her eyes. She is trying to speak. She is asking for her dad. I felt tears prick my eyes. Hot, burning tears of relief. "She is asking for me," Der Evans nodded. "She is fighting Mr. Sterling. The surgery worked. The valve is holding perfectly. Her brain function looks normal. She is going to make it. She is going to live." I turned back to the elevator. Bradley was still sitting on the floor, but he had heard everything. He looked up. His face was a mask of absolute horror. It wasn't the horror of a grieving husband. It was the horror of a man who realizes the witness to his crimes is awake. She is alive, Bradley whispered. I walked up to the threshold of the elevator. I looked down at him. She is alive, Bradley. And she remembers. She remembers who left her at the ER. She remembers who didn't come to visit. And soon she is going to know who was partying on a yacht while she was fighting for air. I signaled to the officer. Take him away. He is done. The officer hit the button. The doors began to slide shut. Bradley lunged forward one last time. Doug's wait. Tell her I love her. Tell her it was a mistake. Tell her not to testify. Doug, please. I don't want to go to jail. The doors slammed shut with a final heavy thud. He was gone. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence where his screaming used to be. The hallway felt lighter. The air felt cleaner. The monster had been banished to the dark, and my daughter was in the light. I turned to Dr. Evans. Take me to her. We walked down the corridor. Every step felt like a victory march. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a guardian who had stood at the gates of hell and pushed the devil back. I walked into room 402. The scary machines were still there, but the rhythm was different. The beep was steady, strong, like a drumbeat of life. Sarah was lying there. Her skin was still pale, but her eyes were open. They were blue, just like her mother's. She looked tired, so incredibly tired, but when she saw me, the corners of her mouth twitched upward. Dad, she rasped. Her voice was weak, barely a whisper. I rushed to her side. I took her hand. It wasn't cold anymore. It was warm. It was alive. I am here, sweetheart, I said, kissing her forehead. I am right here. Where is Brad? She asked. I looked at her. I saw the pain in her eyes, the confusion. I knew this was going to be the hardest part. Healing her heart wasn't just about surgery. It was about the truth. I squeezed her hand. Brad is gone, honey. He couldn't stay. Is he? Coming back, I shook my head slowly. No, he isn't coming back. She looked at me, searching my face. She saw the sadness there, but she also saw the resolve. She closed her eyes for a moment, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. I knew, she whispered. I think I always knew. You are safe now, I told her. The bad part is over. We are going to start fresh. Just you, me, and Leo. Leo, she asked, her eyes snapping open. Is he okay? He is fine, I promised. He is waiting for you. He thinks you are sleeping like a bear in winter. But spring is here, Sarah. Spring is finally here. She squeezed my hand back. It was a weak grip, but it was there. Thanks, Dad, she whispered. For coming. I would have walked from Montana, I said. I sat there as she drifted back into a healing sleep. The monitor beeped steadily. I pulled out my phone. I had one last text to send. It was to Catherine. She is awake. He is gone. We won. I put the phone away. I leaned back in the chair. I was 68 years old. I was tired. My back hurt. I had spent millions of dollars in 12 hours. I had destroyed a man's life. And looking at my daughter's chest rising and falling, I knew I would do it all again in a heartbeat. The yacht was just a boat. The money was just paper. But this was everything. I stayed by Sarah's bedside for an hour watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. But there was one last piece of business I had to attend to. I needed to see it finished. I needed to see the physical removal of the cancer that had been eating away at my family for 5 years. I kissed my daughter's forehead, whispered that I would be right back, and took the service elevator down to the main lobby. The scene outside the hospital entrance was a chaotic masterpiece painted by Catherine Vance. In the hour since the arrest, she had leaked the story to every major news outlet in Los Angeles. The driveway was a sea of satellite trucks flashing cameras and reporters hungry for the fall of a Wall Street golden boy. They weren't here for a hero. They were here for a villain, and Bradley Coulter was about to give them the performance of a lifetime. I stood near the automatic doors, flanked by two of my private security detail who had arrived from the airport. I watched as the elevator in the far corner opened. Detective Miller and 3 uniformed officers marched Bradley out. He looked different now. The shock of the arrest had worn off, replaced by a seething, animalistic rage. He had lost his jacket. His shirt was torn at the shoulder. His expensive loafers scuffed against the floor. When he saw the wall of cameras waiting for him, through the glass doors, he straightened up. For a split second, the narcissist took over. He thought he could spin this. He thought he could charm the lens. But then he saw me. I was standing calmly by the exit, my hands in my pockets, watching him with the dispassionate interest of a man watching a building demolition. Bradley stopped. The officers tried to push him forward, but he planted his feet. His eyes locked onto mine, burning with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "You!" he screamed. The sound tore through the lobby, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. He didn't just shout. He exploded. With a roar that sounded more beast than human, Bradley threw his body weight against the officer on his left. The sudden movement caught the cop off guard. Bradley broke free for a fraction of a second. He didn't run for the door. He didn't run for freedom. He ran at me. "I will kill you," he shrieked, his hands clawing at the air, his face contorted into a mask of absolute madness. "You ruined me. You took everything. I will kill you, old man." He covered 5 feet before reality caught up with him. He didn't reach me. He didn't even get close. My lead security officer, a former Navy SEAL named Marcus, stepped forward. He didn't panic. He moved with the fluid, boring efficiency of a machine. He simply extended one arm, caught Bradley by the throat, and swept his legs out from under him. Bradley hit the hospital floor with a bone-jarring thud. The breath left his lungs in a sharp wheeze. Before he could scramble up, 3 officers were on top of him, pressing his face into the linoleum. "Stop resisting!" Detective Miller shouted, his knee digging into Bradley's spine. Bradley was thrashing, spitting foam and curses. "It's his fault," he screamed into the floor tiles. "He set me up. He is the criminal. Look at him. He is laughing at me. I wasn't laughing. I wasn't even smiling." I walked over to where he was pinned. I looked down at the man who had promised to cherish my daughter. Detective Miller grabbed Bradley by the hair and pulled his head up. "Bradley Coulter," he announced, his voice booming so the reporters outside could hear every syllable. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Sarah Sterling Coulter. You are further charged with grand larceny, wire fraud, insurance fraud, and assault on a police officer." Bradley sobbed. It was a broken, pathetic sound. "No," he whispered. "Not murder. It was business. It was just business." Miller hauled him to his feet. "You have the right to remain silent," Miller said, tightening the cuffs until Bradley winced. "I suggest you start using it because you are never going to talk your way out of this." The doors slid open. The wall of sound from the paparazzi hit us. Flashbulbs exploded like lightning. "Mr. Coulter." "Did you poison your wife, Mr. Coulter? Is it true you are bankrupt? Look this way, Brad. Give us a smile." They dragged him through the gauntlet. He tried to hide his face, but it was too late. The image of Bradley Coulter, disheveled, crying, and handcuffed, was being beamed to every screen in America. He was shoved into the back of the squad car. He looked out the window one last time. He found me, in the crowd. I raised my hand in a small final wave. "Goodbye, son," I whispered. The siren wailed a long, mournful cry that cut through the morning air. The car sped away, taking the darkness with it. I stood there for a moment, letting the sun warm my face. Catherine appeared beside me. She handed me a cup of coffee. "It is done," she said. The arraignment is tomorrow. The DA is asking for no bail. He isn't coming out, Douglas. Not for 20 years. I took the coffee. I looked at the spot where the car had disappeared. 20 years, I mused. Sarah will be 52. Leo will be 26. We have a lot of living to do before we have to think about him again. Let's go, Catherine said. You have a daughter to take care of. I turned my back on the cameras and the chaos. I walked back into the hospital. The automatic doors closed behind me, shutting out the noise of the world. I had arrived in Los Angeles as a desperate father. I was leaving as a savior. 6 months later. The air in Montana tastes different than anywhere else on Earth. It tastes of pine needles, cold river water, and freedom. I sat on the wooden porch of the ranch house, a mug of steaming black coffee in my hand, watching the morning mist roll off the mountains. It was quiet. The kind of quiet you can't buy. Down in the garden, the early summer flowers were blooming. A splash of purple and yellow against the green grass. Sarah was there. She was sitting in her wheelchair, a blanket draped over her lap, but she wasn't just sitting. She was leaning forward, a trowel in her hand, digging into the earth. She looked different. The hospital pallor was gone, replaced by a healthy, wind-kissed glow. The scar on her chest had faded to a thin silver line, a battle wound she wore with pride. She wasn't the fragile girl I had found in that ICU bed. She was a survivor. She was a Sterling. Faster, Mom, you are too slow. I looked over to the makeshift baseball diamond we had set up near the barn. Leo was standing at the plate holding a bat that was slightly too big for him. He was wearing an oversized baseball cap that kept falling over his eyes. I am coming. Leo! Sarah shouted back, her voice strong and clear. Just let me plant these hydrangeas. Grandpa says they bring good luck. She wheeled herself backward, turning the chair with practiced ease. She didn't need the wheelchair all the time anymore. The physical therapy was brutal, but she attacked it with the same ferocity she used to apply to her job. She could walk with a cane now, but for gardening she preferred the chair. It was her chariot. I took a sip of coffee. The bitter warmth spread through my chest. I thought about the last 6 months. It hadn't been easy. The legal battles were messy. Bradley had tried to fight from prison, firing 3 lawyers before he ran out of public defenders. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. When the judge read the sentence, 25 years to life, Bradley didn't scream. He just stared at the table. He had finally run out of words. We sold the house in Los Angeles. We sold the furniture. We sold the jewelry. Every trace of that life was liquidated. I put the money into a trust for Leo's education. It seemed poetic. The money Bradley tried to steal would now pay for his son to become a better man than he ever was. Grandpa watched this. Leo tossed the ball into the air and swung the bat. It was a clumsy swing, but he connected. The ball sailed past the garden landing near the old oak tree. Home run, Sarah cheered, clapping her hands. Leo ran around the bases, his laughter echoing across the valley. I watched them. My family. For years I thought money was the most powerful tool in my arsenal. I thought my net worth was my shield. I used it to control, to protect, to intimidate. And yes, money had unlocked the doors at the hospital. Money had frozen Bradley's assets. Money had hired Catherine. But money didn't make Sarah's heart start beating again. Money didn't make her laugh when she was learning to walk again. Money didn't put that light in Leo's eyes. That was something else. That was blood. That was love. That was the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. I stood up, my knees creaking slightly. I walked down the steps of the porch and across the grass. Sarah looked up as I approached. She shielded her eyes from the sun. Hey, Dad? she smiled. The coffee good. Best in the world, I said. I put a hand on her shoulder. You okay? You have been out here for an hour. Don't overdo it. I am fine, Dad, she said, leaning her head against my hand. I am just making sure the roots are deep. I looked at the hydrangeas. They were sturdy plants. They would survive the winter. They would come back every year stronger than before. Good, I said. Deep roots are important. They hold the soil together when the storm comes. Leo came running up, breathless and sweaty. Did you see, Grandpa? I hit it to the tree. I saw Champ, I said, ruffling his hair. You have got a swing like a lumberjack, he beamed. Can we go fishing later? You promised. I looked at Sarah. What do you think is the gardener taking a break? Sarah wiped a smudge of dirt from her cheek. The gardener is definitely taking a break. Let's go catch some dinner. As we walked toward the river, Leo running ahead and Sarah rolling beside me, I looked back at the house. It stood strong against the mountains. It was a fortress not made of stone and security systems, but of memories and second chances. I had spent my life building a logistics empire, moving things from point A to point B. But I realized now that the most important journey wasn't moving cargo. It was moving my family from the darkness back into the light. Bradley Coulter was a bad memory, a ghost story we would tell only when necessary. But we were real. We were here. And we weren't going anywhere. I took a deep breath of the mountain air. I am Douglas Sterling. I am a father. I am a grandfather. And for the first time in a long time, I am at peace. For Mal, life is simple. You protect what you love. You destroy what threatens it. And you never, ever apologize for winning. Now tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven him? Or would you have pressed the button just like I did? Let me know. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Until next time.